think Vicky is going to make it. She may show up, but I was texting with her the other day and it didn't seem likely.
Vicky reached out to me and let me know she wasn't going to be able to make it today.
Thanks, Rosie. Morning, everyone. Let's just wait another minute. You guys may have caught this article in Civil Beat this morning about the World Bank report that came out on internal migration. Civil Beat picked up the press release, it looks like. Okay, let's call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone. And before we have roll call, I especially want to welcome our new Commissioner, Melanie Islam. Melanie is Principal and Sustainability Director of Mason, formerly Mason Architects. She's been with Mason since 2012. Melanie believes architects have the fortunate responsibility to positively change the way our built environment is constructed, managed and operated to yield a more resilient and sustainable place for the next generation. Excuse me. Melanie is a board member of the YWCA, Oahu, and the American Institute of Architects, Honolulu chapter, and board chair of the U.S. Green Building Council, Hawaii. In her spare time, Melanie cherishes her time in the kitchen, often preparing elaborate South Asian meals or making her sought-after samosas while rocking out to disco music. So, Melanie, I have a special treat. I thought you'd like to hear Dancing Queen from ABBA this morning.
I love it, Chip.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Haley,
No, thank you.
good luck getting that in the minutes. I'll send you the lyrics for the minutes. All right, Haley, would you take roll call, please? Melanie, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I wonder if the lyrics will show up on the transcript.
Yeah.
But I will take roll. Chair Fletcher.
Here.
Vice Chair Algado.
Present.
Commissioner Kaufman.
Present.
Commissioner Islam.
Present.
And Commissioner Keener is absent. We have 4 out of 5 commissioners and we have quorum.
Great, thank you. So the minutes are not available for today. We'll get them soon and we can treat them at a future meeting. Let's see. Communications and correspondence from the public. Is Dr. Ton Keeney here?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Ton.
Thank
I'd
you.
like you to take 3 minutes, please. I'll be timing you. Thanks.
Oh, okay, thank you. You know, I especially want to thank Dr. Kaufman for her illumination of or recognition of my calculations of global warming potential arising from air transport of visitors to Hawaii. But I have a couple of criticisms which I submitted in my communication with you. Dr. Kaufman's back of the envelope calculations. First of all, I'm of the opinion that we cannot use the state greenhouse gas inventory calculations because this would include only flights, calculation of carbon dioxide released from flights from Hawaii to the first arriving or to the arrival destination. So this would not include any connecting flights that passengers would have taken in arriving here. Second, the state greenhouse, and the second criticism would be that the IPCC, since 1 month ago in its 6th assessment report, has endorsed the use of the factor of 3 for computing the global warming potential from the CO2 emissions. And both her use and my previous to that use had been using a factor of 2. So the calculations now based on, need to be based on I believe the method that I had used previously, the HPA's yearly documentation of the number of visitor arrivals from each region of origin, and then selecting a representative airport from that region and using the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization CO2 emissions calculator, to determine the emissions for 1 passenger round trip to Honolulu, and then multiplying that amount by the number of passengers from that region. And then the amount of CO2 generated from each region will then be added together, and this sum will be multiplied by the IPCC endorsed factor of 3 in order to calculate the greenhouse gas in CO2 equivalents from visitor arrivals in Hawaii. So I've done this calculation with a finding of 24 million tons CO2 emissions in 2019. The IPCC endorsement of Lee et al. Method, these calculations lead to a 5% to 95% confidence range of this 24 million ton figure of 14 million tons to 36 million tons. So I just want to contrast this with all electricity generation in Hawaii in 2019 of 7.8 million tons and all ground transportation of 4 million tons.
Dr. Keeney?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure.
We appreciate your involvement. We're going to take your comments under consideration and the materials that you submitted if the commission decides to move forward with an appropriate guidance paper. So we really appreciate the work you've put into this.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comments at this point?
Yes, this is Henry Curtis with Life of the Land. Tawn Keeney has shown that aviation emissions may account for more than half of the state's emissions. And since the counties, with the exception of Maui, and the state are all encouraging tourism, this is a really critical number to calculate in reducing our emissions to net zero. Of course, the net zero law excludes emissions from out of state, but we're still responsible for it as a state. And we would really like to see this commission, which is the #1 commission in the state for really tackling climate change, to take on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Specifically, what sort of guidance paper do you have in mind?
One is, what is the total emissions? And 2, how can we minimize those emissions? and what can be done to offset the emissions.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments? All right. Moving on the agenda, number 6, report on activities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency. Director Gonzer is here, I believe. Matt, the floor is yours.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Chair Fletcher and commissioners. Great to be back with you this morning and members of the public. And thanks to Deputy Director Nicola Hedge for providing office updates at the last meeting, only really a couple of weeks ago, August the 31st. I'm glad that I was able to catch up on the meeting via the recording and actually have since reconnected with those 2 guest speakers, Jana Bavishi of New York City's Resilience Office and Dr. Vivek Chandas of Kappa Strategies. And I think we all understand that heat is really an issue that perhaps doesn't get as much attention out here in the Pacific or in Hawaii and on Oahu as much as it really should. And a lot of the sentiments and community surveys through the Climate Ready Oahu project are bringing more light to the reality of, especially through COVID pandemic stay-at-home orders, the truth of the need for thinking about thermal comfort, both inside structures as well as addressing heat resilience into the future. So thank you to the Commission for setting up that important agenda last meeting, and we hope to be able to share more information moving forward. Similar to others, just want to again thank and congratulate Melanie Islam for her confirmation and service as a Climate Change Commissioner. And though I had a chance to do it after last meeting, just want to publicly say again a big thanks to Commissioner Bettina Maynard for her years of service. Really only two additional updates. Again, not that we haven't been steadily and diligently at work for the last 2.5 weeks since the last meeting, but trying to keep it tight here. We're very pleased to welcome Maya DeVogue to our staff. She started on September the 7th as our communications and outreach manager. You may recall Molly Pierce from our team back at the start of COVID. Myself and Molly actually were co-captains at the city's emergency call center from March through July of last year. Molly officially transitioned over to the Office of Economic Revitalization in July of last year. And we have unfortunately had a big gap in our capacity in terms of being able to stay connected with community and stakeholders and partners. And we're just so thrilled that Maya is now joining us. She actually has worked for the city, specifically the Department of Environmental Services, for more than 4 years as a recycling specialist, along with many other assignments and responsibilities. So we're really pleased that we can lean on her and her experience educating and engaging stakeholders on issues such as the mandatory business recycling ordinances, plastic bag ban, disposable foodware ordinance, and other education campaigns around composting, food waste reduction, et cetera. So again, we're just really pleased that Maya is aboard and that we have this additional capacity in the office. And then lastly, just wanted to provide one climate adaptation update and one climate action update. On the adaptation side, in partnership with the UH Coastal Geology Group, we continue to update shoreline change rates around Oahu and not only use this information for planning purposes, but more importantly, moving forward, incorporating it into forthcoming regulation. So these data are really essential inputs for an upcoming proposal to amend our shoreline management practices, in particular the Shoreline Setback Ordinance, which is Chapter 23, and the Special Management Area Ordinance, Chapter 25. And that notion of updating shoreline rules and regulations was identified in the Oahu Resilience Strategy as Action 29. So again, these data, along with what the Commission was able to provide in terms of a guidance document for improved shoreline setback practices, really are coming to the fore right now. And we do anticipate a proposed bill to be introduced at the Planning Commission in the coming months, if not in October, then in November. And then once successful, in updating these ordinances, we would join Maui and Kauai counties in having this foundational, contextual, and science-based life and safety rules for coastal development. So more to come on that, and we'll make sure to provide updates on any of the scheduling of meetings, hearings, et cetera. And then lastly, at next week's Transportation, Sustainability, and Health Committee meeting next Tuesday, the 21st at 9 a.m., Deputy Director Nicola Hedge will be providing a presentation on background for better building energy benchmarking policy and program. And this is another Resilient Strategy Action 21, and also Action 5.3 in the city's Climate Action Plan. So Nicola last month provided an update about what the city is doing in terms of being transparent about our energy usage and using that information to empower us to improve our own facilities. And there's interest from City Council about thinking about a community-wide policy and program. So stay on the lookout for that. And again, that's the September the 21st Transportation, Sustainability, and Health Committee, streamed live via City Council's website or Olelo, starting at 9 a.m. Happy to take any questions.
Questions, commissioners? Thank you, Matt. Haley has just put the meeting agenda for the Transportation, Sustainability, and Health Committee meeting next Tuesday up in the chat.
And for pre-reading, the presentation materials are also attached with that agenda.
So Matt, what do you think about the commission having a meeting focused on the Chapter 23 plans that you discussed?
I would just, just wait for it to be announced on the Planning Commission. So the process for those kinds of rules and regulations that affect planning and zoning, it's a multi-step process involving the city's Planning Commission, which then ultimately would come to the City Council. So I don't know the hearing date, and I don't know the schedule for this commission's subsequent meetings, but that's certainly a good topic item to have on top of mind and connect with the Department of Planning and Permitting to see if they'd be available to give an additional sort of briefing on what's the proposal.
Thanks. I'll confer with you offline separately, but maybe we can figure out the best place in the chain of events where our commission could fit in and at least give, broaden the public awareness, public testimony associated with this progress.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Congratulations. I think that's great to be undertaking this. It's very important, as you said. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Okay.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank you. Okay, moving on the agenda to number 7, the central item for our meeting today. We have 2 presentations. The first is going to be from Scott Glenn, Chief Energy Officer of the Hawaii State Energy Office. Following his presentation, we'll have a short period of questions for commissioners. And perhaps the public, I want to be aware of time, but then I do want to get straight on to a presentation by Ben Sullivan from the city, Energy Program Manager from the Resiliency Office. So these 2 presentations are the main content for today. Scott, I'll turn the floor over to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Aloha, Chair Fletcher, and aloha, commissioners. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. I just want to also thank Dr. Keeney for, I was a little nervous about being too wonky in my presentation, but now I feel free to go full wonk after a discussion of the global warming potential of CO2 in the latest IPCC report. Thank you, Chip, again for being here to talk about the zero emission clean economy target. What I'd like to do is first talk a little bit about that target, and then about energy's role in that, and then talk a little bit about our energy system and provide really a systems perspective of the discussion. So first off, for those who aren't familiar with the target itself, this is the language of the statute. It's 225P-5. So this is the core of the state's goal. And you often see different descriptions of it: net zero, our carbon neutral target, or our, you can't see?
No. Yeah, we're not seeing your screen, Scott. Thanks.
Let's try this again. How's that?
There we go. That looks great.
Okay. So this is the language from the statute 225P-5. And what this shows is just the core text of it. There's some other language in there. The main thing I highlighted here in orange is that our goal is to sequester more than we emit. And so it's not actually a carbon neutral or net zero target. It's a net negative in the definition of the IPCC. And Hawaii is the only state in the country that has a target to sequester more than it emits. And I would posit it's the only scientifically accurate and directionally correct target to have, because a lot of states are going to spend time on trying to balance out zero emissions for 30 years from now. And we know that the science already tells us we got to pull out as much CO2 as we can as quickly as practicable. And that's what the state's target tells us to do. Now, Henry's right in his characterization that it is within the state. That language is right there expressly stated. And I understand and been following along to some degree the Commission's discussion on production-based accounting versus consumption-based accounting for emissions. As the state, we do have this statute that we follow, and we are focused on within the state. And I think there's a real practical matter to that as well, which is it's within our control. We can do something about it. We have direct influence and control over emissions that occur within the state. Some of it through local land use at the city level, some of it through state policy, and then there's some that's internationally economically driven, like aviation and shipping, but we have influence as a state on how those emissions occur within the state. So that's certainly a starting point for the discussion, but I don't mean to close off the consumption-based approach, but just to highlight that aspect. Also within this, I want to underscore that line as quickly as practicable. So in contrast to the state's renewable energy portfolio standard, which says we're going to have 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2045, this one says get on with it and be done with it no later than 2045. And so I think that's also a very important phrase for guiding how we think about the work we're doing. I understand some folks on the call have some qualms about or disagreements with the state greenhouse gas inventory. I'll come back to that in a moment. Or actually, sorry, right here. So this is, so we do work with the inventory. It does help guide our policy making and review as the State Energy Office. And this is from the 2017 year of the inventory. And I just want to highlight that energy is 86% of emissions in the state as tracked by the inventory. And then within that, transportation, broadly written, is the largest source of emissions over stationary combustion, which are power plants, the refinery, and things like that. So when we talk about the state's greenhouse gas emissions, we're really talking about energy at the end of the day. There's only about 15% of emissions that come from agricultural activity, land use change, waste, and other sources. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is an energy problem. So where the Energy Office comes in, we have a mission statement given to us by the legislature. This is from HRS 19671. Our purpose as the Hawaii State Energy Office is to promote energy efficiency, renewable energy, and clean transportation to help achieve a resilient, clean energy economy. And we understand those phrases to effectively mean a decarbonized economy. What we're talking about, a clean energy economy, means we're eliminating effectively 85% of the emissions from the economy, in which case we really are becoming a clean energy economy when we get to that point. But you know, there's a lot going on energy. And so what I'd like to do is now get really wonky with you guys and introduce you to what's called the Sankey diagram. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, or the public often doesn't see this, but this is something that energy experts often use. This is a diagram of energy moving through a jurisdiction. So these are made by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They do one for countries, they do one for states. So they have a generic template that they use, and then they plug in the numbers from each state to generate this. So on the left-hand side, what you see are the sources of energy. So solar, that's utility scale and rooftop, hydro, wind, geothermal, natural gas, coal, biomass, and petroleum. Up at the top, you see the orange box for electricity. So that's, and you see these lines connecting the boxes. So that's how much of that source goes to be electricity. But lines that skip it and go to the pink boxes are lines that go directly into use at the sector. So the pink boxes are the sectors. So residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. And then on the far right-hand side is kind of a summary. We have this rejected energy and we have energy services. And we'll walk through this a little bit more closely because we have some. So on the left-hand side, this nuclear, we don't have it in Hawaii. So I'm just gonna erase it from the slide. Down here with natural gas, this box is a little too big. So we're gonna just reshrink it so people don't overly focus on natural gas as being a major source. And just one note as well about the numbers on here. The numbers are all BTUs, British thermal units. So that's a common denominator to compare different generation technologies. Because things get measured in different ways. This puts them all on the same playing field. Rather than focus on the numbers, I think what's relevant for our discussion are the relative widths of the bars connecting the boxes. That's where we really are focusing. Down here for biomass, we have biomass, we also have biofuel. So let's just rename it bioenergy for discussion. And then on the right-hand side, rejected energy, this is kind of an abstract concept. What it really is saying, it's wasted energy, it's heat, it's inefficiency, it's you know, it's the internal combustion engine wasting most of its power of burning a gallon of gasoline and turning it into heat and noise and waste rather than pushing the car forward. And then energy services is, at the end of the day, it's the energy we use. So it's turning the light on, it's running the computer to do this Zoom call right now. This is energy services or energy used. So this gives you a picture of Hawaii and where our energy comes from, how it goes to electricity, or be directly used in buildings and transportation, things like that. So I want to talk about petroleum for a minute. Hawaii is the most petroleum dependent state in the country. And most of our petroleum comes from places around the world that are not necessarily friends of Hawaii or the United States. Up here in the left-hand corner, this is the latest 2020 data. 2019, the #1 source of oil for Hawaii was Libya. 2020, the #1 source of Hawaii was Russia. We also added some new countries to our suppliers, including the Congo and South Sudan. So these are places that Hawaii depends on in order for it to meet its energy needs right now. And so when we bring in a barrel of oil, it gets broken up into multiple uses. So about 1/4 of the barrel goes to make electricity. At the bottom, you can see about 1/3 of the barrel goes to make jet fuel. And then we also have ground transportation being about 1/4 of the barrel. So between electricity and cars, we have about 1/2 a barrel being used. And then we have the remainder for things like marine transportation and then direct uses in homes, businesses, and industrial production. So we can map this barrel back onto this chart. So down here in this corner where you see the petroleum box, we can put the barrel there, and then we can show how this maps onto these bars. This is electricity. This is the other that runs down the length of this over to these pink boxes. And then all the rest of this big green bar is transportation. And within that, we have marine, ground, and air. So this is really a picture of Hawaii's energy and how we use it. And when we think about our goals as a state, we talk about the 100% renewable portfolio standard, but that's really for electricity. it's not for all energy use. And when we talk about energy efficiency, that really shows up on the sector end of things, where we're going into homes and businesses and industry and reducing their use of electricity or making it more efficiently used. So when we talk about the better buildings approach, what we're talking about are these pink boxes. So really what we're saying is when we talk about Hawaii's 100% renewable energy goals, we're not looking at fuel at all. We're looking at electricity and what goes into it. We're looking at this black bar running from coal up to electricity. And we're looking at the kind of orangish part here, this green bar running up to the electricity box. So all the work that we're putting into for utility scale solar, rooftop battery, home battery, onshore wind, offshore wind, all of that is focused on these two bars right here. It's not focused down here on the big green bar running towards transmission. So there's a lot of things that are underway. So one thing that's important to note especially for the city and county of Honolulu, is the legislature banned the use of coal by September 2022. And so I put up here a little scratch mark over coal, and we're working right now to replace that coal energy mainly with solar projects. So there's several solar plus battery projects underway across the island to help replace that coal power. But they're not going to be built in time for the coal plant to be turned off. We might be able to get one or two of them moved up in time to make that. So what's going to happen in the meantime, until those projects come online, is we're actually going to burn more fuel oil to make electricity to replace the lost coal power. And then probably within 6 months or a year of the coal plant being turned off, these solar plants will come online. And then we'll be able to say credibly, we've turned off coal and we have renewables in its place. But we're going to go through about a year and a half transition where these projects are coming online and gradually increasing the amount of renewables for electricity. So, but September 1st, 2022, coal disappears from our energy flows. We're no longer relying on coal for Hawaii for our power. Also, sometime in the next couple of years, we're going to see hydrogen come online. One thing about hydrogen is a energy carrier. It's like electricity in that way. So you can make hydrogen from solar, you can make it from natural gas, you can make it from oil. So that's why I put the box here in the middle, kind of floating here, because we don't know what the lines are yet for what will be flowing into the hydrogen box to make it. Hydrogen also can then be used for different things. So we'll also have lines coming out of the hydrogen box to the different pink boxes. So we will be able to directly use hydrogen in transportation, industrial processes. You might have seen that I think Norway just did steel production using hydrogen power instead of coal power. That's the kind of thing that's coming down the line. So what about transportation? We do have some policies in place. The city has some policies in place as well. For the passenger vehicles to be, for light duty passenger vehicles to switch to electric. That's an important starting point. And what we're also seeing coming down the line is inter-island flight will also probably go electric in the next few years. We're already hearing business plans and innovators and companies are coming to the state, asking the state to start preparing airport infrastructure to accommodate electric flight. Now, inter-island flight is probably manageable. Long distance flying, probably not ready for electric. Similarly, shipping today is mainly diesel power or some type of bunker fuel for inter-island shipping. That could readily be replaced with biodiesel, or it could become or if hydrogen comes online, possibly electric in some way might happen. So what we're going to see is some portion of this is going to move over to these sources for ground transportation, for light duty cars, most people's cars, the sedans, maybe the light duty trucks are going to go electric. Inter-island flights, electric, and inter-island shipping will probably go electric. But that still leaves a very big puka. And so it's going to go electric, and then it'll come down here and be tracked in transportation. But what happens with the larger vehicles? So we have big trucks, we have construction equipment, we have We have ports equipment that are these enormous vehicles that have to move heavy weights, short distances. It's not clear they're ready to switch to electric. But probably they are ready to move to something like a biodiesel if hydrogen comes online, a hydrogen fuel cell, or some other type of technology that might be coming. For shipping, and right now, most of the shipping industry is moving to liquefied natural gas. And Hawaii has a policy position to not move to LNG. So we're going to be having to look at other solutions because we don't want to embrace other fossil fuel sources. So for long distance shipping, as well as long distance aviation, we're probably going to be looking at some type of bioenergy, so biodiesel, biofuel. The airline industry on the continent is looking at sustainable aviation fuel, which is generally either some type of ethanol or blended bio-based source, or some type of synthetic source. So I have up here a box for innovation. So that DAC stands for direct air capture. And what we're seeing are some pilots for capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere or from existing projects, existing emission sources, and then repurposing it to make things like jet fuel. So those are coming down the line, probably sooner than electric long haul flights, but we just have to watch that. Right now, though, the trend is not going towards electric battery planes to fly from Honolulu to LA, but maybe some type of sustainable aviation fuel. So that's probably going to be the course that this looks like. If hydrogen comes online, hydrogen fuel cells could also provide that power to cover that. So I think that's getting to the, I know I just threw a lot at you guys trying to walk you through an abstract flow chart, but trying to convey a sense of where we are as a state to tackle the electricity piece, the energy efficiency piece, and we've got some really good pieces in place to start tackling ground transportation, but we have some really big challenges around fuels. And as you guys can see with the barrel of oil graphic here, electricity and transportation are tied together in terms of cost. And as we replace electricity with renewables, the cost to bring that barrel here gets borne more and more by the transportation side. And at some point, either it's not going to be cost effective to refine on here, or we have to pay increasingly higher prices for our transportation needs. And so we need to start looking at the transportation side and planning ahead, which is what the state's starting to do, looking at the aviation side and the shipping side. So that's the main presentation I had set up. Wanted to just really give you guys this kind of systems perspective, and then I can answer any questions, or if you guys just want to say tap out, we're done, that's too much. So I'll just stop there, Chair, and open it, turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Scott. That was fantastic. Just reviewing some comments in the chat here. I think we have a couple questions that I can push out to you. Let's see. Commissioner Allegado, did Scott answer the questions regarding solar that you had?
I just wanted to clarify that when you spoke about the shift to the solar plants, if that will then, because currently in the Sankey diagram, the solar energy is all going to residential and none is going to electricity generation. So I just wanted to confirm for myself that the plants will then go towards electricity generation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's the yellow line is a little hidden in the electricity generation chart in that piece.
Great,
But,
mahalo.
yeah.
And then I also wanted to clarify, this is currently in the Sankey diagram, it's capturing, I guess, public versus private use of solar, so it would be the private use is residential and then the more public is, I'm sorry, I can't remember what the chart said, but I just wanted to clarify those for my understanding.
Yes, so residential, commercial, industrial, transportation don't distinguish private versus public in that sense. It's just focused on what is being generated and what sector is it being used in.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Kaufman, any comments or questions?
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott. That was a really nice visual to walk us through that. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the kind of role of the refineries and sort of what you touched on at the very end there, that there will be this pressure to sort of transition away from refining on island and moving towards an import terminal. Some of that transition has already taken place, but not entirely. Can you talk a little bit about that, in particular, the state's role in planning for that?
Sure. So that's a pretty big question for the state. And in 2014 or so, the state did a refinery task force where there was the question that we have two refineries. They each had a different owner. And at the time they were up for sale, and there was a question of whether someone would buy them or not, or whether the state would need to start importing refined product. And so what that means is right now we bring crude and we break that barrel up into jet fuel, gasoline, diesel, et cetera. And if we are importing, then we're just bringing the jet fuel directly here. We're bringing diesel, low sulfur fuel oil, gasoline directly here. And as you mentioned, Commissioner, we are already importing jet fuel and gasoline. We bring those directly to the island already. So we both bring the imported product and we refine it on the island. This past year, we saw a really interesting question, because up until last year, that refinery task force expectation was the state's electricity goal and the eventual switch to electric vehicles would mean that the economics of sustaining a oil refinery in Hawaii would fall apart, that there wouldn't be enough demand to justify the activity of refining on the island. And so that's still in the expectation. But what we saw last year, or a year and a half ago at this point, was when the governor closed the state to tourism and tourism stopped happening, that also meant jet fuel stopped being used. And so rather than the electricity demand and the EV gasoline demand disappearing, the jet fuel piece fell out. And so the electricity and the EV piece have been gradually decreasing. They're half the barrel, but they've been decreasing, whereas jet fuel, it's a third of the barrel and it disappeared overnight. And so in response to that, for the refinery to stay open, they increased the price of the fuel oil that they sell to Hawaiian Electric. And so Hawaiian Electric in turn asked the Public Utilities Commission to pass that cost on. And so everyone on Oahu's electricity bill went up about $5 to $6 a month in order to keep the refinery in business until tourism returns to a level to have enough demand to keep the refinery operational. So we have a direct relationship and a cross subsidy for our electricity, gasoline, and jet fuel use. And I think, Commissioner, maybe just to take it an extra step forward, the thought is right now our renewable energy goals, because they're focused on electricity, mean that residents are paying for our renewable energy transition. And tourists are only incidentally paying for it. Whereas the fossil fuel infrastructure, tourists are directly subsidizing it because they're the main consumers of jet fuel leaving the state. There are residents as well, but tourists are the ones who pay for that jet fuel. And so that third of the barrel that goes to jet fuel, or that we import to use as jet fuel, is being paid by tourists, which in turn subsidizes and keeps more affordable the electricity and gasoline use that we have for fossil fuel. So I mean, you're an economist. I'm not explaining anything to you you don't already know, but I think it's just important to highlight for the public that our renewable energy goals right now don't have tourism as a direct subsidy to help with that transition. And it's more of an indirect subsidy through their incidental use of electricity at the hotel or while they're shopping or things like that. But their hotel use is mainly natural gas. They fly out of the state on jet fuel. You know, that seems to be where most of it is. Now, I don't have precise numbers around that, but that's kind of a heuristic for thinking about it.
Thank you. If I can ask just a follow-up question. I mean, I have lots of thoughts about this issue of the cross subsidy. We won't go into that, I think, in this meeting, but given that experience, I mean, what is stopping, or what is the thinking, I should say, on sort of speeding up the idea of an import terminal versus full refinery operations. I know it's a private sector market as well. That's not entirely the state's decision, but are there plans in the way, say, for example, to bring in the pipelines to do that? What are the thoughts there?
In the most recent Public Utilities Commission docket related to the question of the refinery and fuel oil to the utility, the Public Utilities Commission directed the Energy Office to work with the utility and the Public Utilities Commission to develop what we call a common operating picture, which is to have that kind of on the ground comprehensive sense of what's needed and to be ready to act in case a sudden shift happens, which we weren't when COVID hit. So we are right now developing that on the ground knowledge of, do we have the pipes? Do we have the fuel tanks? And not just for Oahu, for every island, if we need to switch to import terminaling. Now, is the refinery going to close suddenly? Probably not at this point. They're past the worst of the economic hit from tourism being closed. Jet fuel numbers are climbing back up. The price of oil is climbing back up. And so there's some level of maybe we're past the worst of it in this immediate crisis. But long term, at some point, will on-island crude continue? We want to be ready for when that's not the case, or if there's other options such as some type of biofuel or other type of new energy source that we don't know yet is coming online that makes sense for this refinery equipment to be used for, that might be another possibility as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Islam, any questions, comments?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Scott. That was an excellent presentation. I really appreciated seeing the Sankey diagram and really understanding kind of where our energy sources are, particularly fueling the building sector. We often don't see that breakdown. I'm actually quite curious about what our market readiness is to sort of start to adopt or bring in more of these innovative technologies and alternate energy sources, particularly the hydrogen and the carbon capture. I know there's a lot of sort of separate conversation, particularly going around the discussion of hydrogen. And I'm just kind of curious if there's ways in which we can start to look at adapting our current infrastructure, or if there is already sort of a workforce here, or if it's an opportunity to develop sort of workforce and kind of transition us to our sort of, I would say 2045 goals.
Thanks, Commissioner, and thank you for volunteering to serve on this. I know it's a big ask and a lot of time to be on a board. The hydrogen it's often characterized as it's always 5 years out. Where are we with it? It's coming. When it will hit, we don't know. And in some ways, that's how solar panels and batteries happened as well. So solar panels were always 5 years out. And then suddenly in 2007, they hit this inflection point, and we've just run wild with them. Batteries, that happened about 2 or 3 years ago. Suddenly it's an inflection point, and now every home can get a battery. Hydrogens, we're kind of watching for when is that going to happen. But I would recommend reaching out to, I guess, Matt's counterpart on Hawaii Island, Riley Saito. Riley is going gangbusters with putting in place hydrogen infrastructure on that island, sourcing it, and because they have longer distances to travel, they're looking less at electrification of buses of the county bus fleet and looking more at converting them to hydrogen buses using hydrogen fuel cells. So they are working on that. I think another important law that was passed, it's one of those small, subtle law changes that can open the way to big changes, is the legislature last year passed a law that exempted hydrogen fuel sales from weights and measures requirements. And what that means is up until last year, just like gasoline, you have to weigh it and know that if you pay, $3 or $4 for a gallon of gasoline, you're getting a gallon, right? And so that's all weights and measures maintained by the State Department of Agriculture. And hydrogen was under that requirement as well, or it was ambiguous if it was. Whereas, for example, electric charging stations, there's no weights and measures equivalent of if you plug in and you pay $2 for your charge to your car, that you're actually getting the charge you paid for. And so, that's a certain business risk that we're willing to tolerate to promote the electrification of transportation. And so the legislature said we should feel the same way about hydrogen. And so they exempted hydrogen from the weights and measures as well, to help try to promote more hydrogen fueling stations and the disaggregation of hydrogen being bundled in the sales of, say, the Mirai, versus having fueling stations for individuals to be able to get it and just stop, fuel up, and pay and go on. So those are some pieces that are being put in place, but it hasn't quite hit that inflection point yet.
Great, thank you. I'm personally a Mid-Eye owner, so I've been following the hydrogen conversation
You
personally
were at the
myself.
Hydrogen Day, right?
I was, but yeah, and so Elemental has
Yeah,
an excellent presentation next week as well too, but I'm also very curious about it because I do believe it has some great sort of transformation for our city. So, but I will follow up with Riley as well, just to get more information on what's going on Hawaii Island. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Scott, as we move towards electrifying the electrification of our inter-island flights, and more of our ground transportation moves towards electricity, isn't the message being sent to our current refinery that you're going to be going out of business soon? And I mean, by soon, I mean a decade timescale. Why isn't the state focusing more on creating a refinery that uses atmospheric CO2 as the feedstock? This also not only moves us to reduced emissions, but it strongly moves us to become much more resilient as we see more and more socioeconomic disruption taking place elsewhere in the world. For instance, the multi-month backlog that is currently in place at a couple of the shipping container ports on the West Coast.
Good question, Chip. I think we want to promote that, and we're trying to figure out how we can promote things like direct air capture use as the state. Also, I think the technology is still in the proving out stage. I know there's a lot of off-the-shelf pieces. Putting them together in a way that has a business plan, I think, is still a step to be taken. And I think the refinery is, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they are not, they're not unaware of the situation. And so, they've been very clear. They understand what the state's renewable energy goals are. And I would imagine they're probably examining their business plans to see how they can fit into that kind of future, assuming they still want to operate and do business in Hawaii. But I think we have a very clear policy direction we're headed.
I would refine my wording rather than them going out of business. I would put it as them pivoting their business plan in a new direction towards direct air capture. And also, lastly, so last year, the state legislature declared a climate emergency. That was an opportunity for the governor to also get on board with that and enact some strong measures that otherwise he would not have such a window available to him. But we didn't see something like that happen. What was the discussion taking place in your office? And what's your thinking about that?
To your first point, I certainly hope the refinery is examining some opportunities to pivot and look at how they can align with that. To the second question, I think there's a question about using emergency power. And, is an emergency being declared as a rhetorical device or an actual governance tool? So the governor has declared numerous emergencies, some of them, frankly, climate emergencies in a way, responding to the rain bombs on Kauai and West Oahu. Not a climate emergency, but an energy one with the lava flow from Kilauea erupting. and having to relocate all of the supplies at Puna Geothermal Ventures. So it's not like he's been reluctant to declare emergencies when he needs to. I think a question to think about is what's the value, what will an emergency declaration achieve? So in one case, does that mean accelerating the deployment of renewable energy? Well, just 2 weeks ago, the neighborhood boards of the west end of this island petitioned the Public Utilities Commission to pause the process they have underway to do community-based renewable energy projects to allow these community groups to have more time to digest what's being proposed and have an opportunity to weigh in and help shape the request for proposals. And so, on the one hand, we have the United Nations declaring code red for humanity, and we're in a climate crisis and we need to take all urgent action. And on the other hand, we have residents who are asking for more time, and they're saying we're not ready and we really need to spend some more time to understand, get comfortable, weigh in and help shape this so that these projects, if they do happen, can be successful and we can live with them. So there's a real tension there in taking action. And I see, but I want to just make a second point, which is separate from the community engagement side. The supply chain issues are increasingly becoming more and more difficult. So the 10 projects that we have planned to be built in the next year or a couple years to turn off the coal plant and replace the coal plant's power, they have to bring in solar panels, inverters, rooftop solar. We need these new inverters that we're trying to bring in. All of these things are being competed for in the global market where there's already a shortage and shipping disruptions. So for us to suspend laws or declare an emergency and bypass certain police protections we have in place to say we got to go do this, we may not even be able to do it because we might not be able to get the supplies to Hawaii in time to do it.
Thank you. I'll just say that, declaring a climate emergency, as you mentioned, and as you know, can be done with pinpoint accuracy. And I mean, I believe that a small portion of the West Maui shoreline was hardened because the highway was threatened with coastal erosion there, and that was done under emergency permitting. So that sort of thing doesn't need to draw in the question of whether communities should be forced to endure more industrial scale energy production in their backyards or some of these other issues. Again, it can be done with pinpoint accuracy, but I really appreciate your response. I do want to move on to Ben. Does anybody in the public have a pressing question or comment? We'll open it up after Ben's presentation as well. Okay, I don't see anything. Scott, I hope you'll be able to stick around for continued discussion. Thank you very much.
I want to hear Ben as well. So.
Okay, no doubt. So I'd like to introduce Ben Sullivan to provide us with an update on City and County of Honolulu climate mitigation strategies. Ben is the Energy Program Manager for the Resiliency Office. Thanks for being with us today, Ben.
Thanks, Chip. Let me do what I got to do here for sharing screens.
Sure.
And we'll get into it. Okay, hopefully that was not my phone. Can everyone see the slide deck that I have set up? I'm seeing head nods. Okay, sounds good. So let me just open by saying how happy I am to be here in this conversation. I really am thrilled to be in the situation I'm in, and really what that situation is working in a beautiful city with an incredible team inside government that has this wonderful climate commission doing so much work, and we're all trying to make the city a better place, make it more beautiful through buildings, through transportation, so that people of the city can enjoy it more in the future. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be part of the team, and really so thankful of all the work that has preceded myself arriving, because I just started in this job 3 months ago. Started working for Matt and Nicola and the team 3 months ago, and really can't say enough about how great it's been thus far. So with that, I'm gonna see if I can coordinate. Okay, did the slide advance? Saying yes. So including a little direction from the big boss here is important. And so Mayor Blangiardi has been really clear that we're going to be about implementation, and that's exactly where we're at. And so I think a lot of you folks in this call are very familiar with the climate action plan that was recently passed, and it gives very clear direction in the areas indicated here on the slide: transportation, particularly ground transportation, buildings and energy, and then of course waste. Chip, when he spoke to me about this prior to the meeting, gave specific guidance on focusing in on vehicle electrification and on buildings. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and specifically how those relate to the climate action plan and really what we're doing currently in the program to advance those efforts. So there's a lot of things to do in all these areas, but what are we focused on right now? And so you can see the four major strategies that come under this umbrella: electrify the city fleet and support high efficiency vehicles, reduce energy demand by increasing energy efficiency, maximize energy efficiency and renewable energy through city operations and assets, and expand renewable energy planning and expedite permitting. So diving into vehicle electrification, here's the three pieces I'd love to talk a little bit about today. I think most of you are aware of the efforts in terms of city fleet electrification, and perhaps some of the most visible efforts include the Department of Transportation Services and the bus. So I thought it would be fun to open up, and I don't know if other people feel like coming off of putting their cameras back on, but I'd love to see a show of hands for who has ridden an electric bus so far in this whole experience. I see Matt's hand up. Any of the commissioners, have you had an opportunity yet? So I will tell you this: I ride the 6 into work every day, and it normally is a diesel bus that rumbles up, and I can hear it coming around the corner, and it's a great service, and I value it a lot. But there was a day about a month ago when I didn't know where the bus was. I wasn't looking up. I was just sitting on the bench waiting for the bus to arrive, and all of a sudden it's right in front of me, and it was an electric bus, and that is the bus being rotated around the island. I think that's part of the beauty that we're talking about. So when I opened up and said how beautiful this is, clean buses that get you where you want to go silently is certainly a part of that vision. Also want to talk a little bit about public EV charging and in city lots in particular. And then third, we're going to discuss a little bit about the EV ready ordinance. And so, looking at the climate action plan again, action 4.2 is about developing a plan and to implement city passenger vehicle fleet transition to achieve 100% clean fleet. Oh geez, this is a clean fleet goal by 2035. So making all these things happen, and then again, there's multiple components, and I'm just going to go ahead and advance the slide and jump right into a lot of them here. So this slide is just giving you a look at some of just a little glimpse into the thinking in terms of what it takes to electrify the city fleet. And so I'm going to start. This is not this particular graphic is not focused on DTS. They do have a very advanced plan. This one is on automotive equipment services, which is 1,800 vehicles managed by the Department of Facilities Maintenance. But if you look across the whole city, we're talking about 600 buses, 200 paratransit vehicles. We're talking about the 1,800 vehicles represented somewhat in this slide here under AES, 600 vehicles under Honolulu Police Department, and another 200 under Honolulu Fire Department. So needless to say, it's a huge, huge transition. It takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination, and it's a lot different than what we used to do, especially on the fueling side, on the charging side. We can't just fuel anywhere. We got to find out where these chargers need to be, how long they are going to be on the charger. So how many vehicles are there? How long are they going to be there? And then what are the other infrastructure needs at any given site? Next item I want to touch on is a key policy associated with this overall effort. And then, this is really looking more broadly. So instead of talking about the city internally, this is talking about how do we help support the transition to electric vehicles out in the island, around the island, more broadly in the private sector. And so I think everyone's very familiar with this EV ready ordinance that was passed, and I can't say enough about how important it is. And I think you all know the reason this is so important is, again, because when you're putting in charging infrastructure, it gets very, very expensive to retrofit. But if you can do these things at the point of new construction, you can save a whole lot of money, and you can put yourself in a position to much more rapidly get yourself prepared to electrify the fleet. So there's some investment that's required here, and the assumption is that a very, very significant portion of our fleet in the future will be electric vehicles. Let me see, catching up on my notes here. So transitioning to building efficiency. And again, just picking 3 components from our plan that are front and center right now. And so going to talk a little bit about municipal benchmarking, then move to citywide benchmarking and energy code adoption. And so if we think about our building stock, I think everyone's aware, unlike vehicles, it has a much longer life. And so we're talking about, instead of a 10-year life, maybe a 50-year life or even longer for a lot of buildings. And so how do we think about not only making our new buildings more efficient, but also dealing with the inventory and building stock that we have now? So the city has been very busy working on making their own buildings more energy efficient. That includes an effort to benchmark all of our facilities over 10,000 square feet, which is well underway. We expect to be done early next year with that process. And it also includes some work on performance contracts, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then ultimately moving to citywide benchmarking after kind of leading by example, as Matt referenced at the beginning of the meeting today, and asking folks to report on their buildings. Buildings that are over a certain size, let's get some data coming in on how they're performing and help encourage the private sector to move to more efficiency. Next, so this is just kind of a quick overview of what is building benchmarking and what is a building benchmarking ordinance. So really the steps in benchmarking a building is that a building owners really benchmark their utility performance over time. And so they report that to the city, and then that information gets disclosed to the public on an annual basis so that people can see how buildings are performing across the system. This allows for comparison across buildings. This allows for more investment in efficiency and does a lot of good things. So these policies are adopted widely across the country, and some of the data that we have shows that you see, on average, perhaps as much as a 3% annual efficiency gain in areas where there's a benchmarking program. So not insignificant at all in terms of what can happen as a result of these type of programs. Key partners in this include the utility and Hawaii Energy and others. And so it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but we're excited about diving into it very soon. Next slide. So talking about municipal building energy retrofits, I think a lot of you know about the performance contracts that are underway. This slide is really just showing you some of the outcomes that are expected from the Johnson Controls performance contract in phase 1. But I think it's interesting to know that there's a phase 2 already in the works, and that one is going to deliver another 1.5 million in annual savings, along with a whole lot of energy and water savings. And there's also an ESCO underway with the Department of Parks and Recreation. On top of that, the city is doing a lot of work with the Department of Environmental Services, and they are looking very hard, not only at making their operations more efficient and looking at renewable energy, but also trying to utilize all the biogas that comes out of the production of wastewater and also from the landfill. And so those are things that you'll be seeing movement on in the near future. So diving back into the code. So again, with new buildings, I think a lot of you folks here, is everyone with me? Codes can get pretty boring, I realize. Melanie, I know you spend a lot of time in this area, so happy to have you on the team. We're working under the 2015 currently. The national standard is moving quickly, and they're already, at the national level, folks are already working to develop the 2024. Right now, we're evaluating both the 2018 and 2021 building code. And I guess for those who don't spend a lot of time walking out on building codes, what these things do is they really look at the various building systems and try to help them become more efficient through standards. And so you're talking about the building envelope and insulation requirements and window and fenestration requirements. You're talking about mechanical systems and how they perform. And then of course, lighting systems, and then summing it all up. How do you create a whole building, and then how do you demonstrate compliance with that? So, the process that we undergo currently with regards to the code is that the national code is written and adopted at a national level, and then the State Building Code Council, with a lot of help from Scott's team. I don't know if Scott's still on the call, but his team, including Howard Wigg, do a lot of work with the State Building Code Council to then adopt at a state level. And then we as the city are mandated to either adopt or default to the state code within 2 years of that time. And so the timeline that we're currently on is that the State Building Code Council adopted the 2018 IECC in December 2020. So we have until December 2022 to make our move in terms of local amendments. Yeah. No, I think one of the key points here with the code is recognizing that, you know, this is the biggest opportunity we have to drive efficiency into the building stock for new buildings as we adopt. And so there's always some tension, you know, in terms of how do we deal with first cost versus life cycle cost, and there's a lot of analysis on that. It's a difficult area, but we hope that we can continue to just adopt more and more stringent codes as we go. And I'm going to stop there because I think the best part of this is not me repeating stuff that a lot of folks are familiar with and just giving you updates, but more the back and forth that happens as a result. So love to take some questions and hear where folks are at.
Thanks. Thank you, Ben. That was wonderful. I'm going to just inject a real quick question here before we go around with the commissioners. Has the city considered providing developers with subsidies to help them develop projects that would otherwise not pencil out? You know, net zero projects, one water projects, things like that.
Additional subsidies to, for example, the solar tax credits and other things like that. Is that your question?
Yeah, just to provide some assistance, because I know that in a discussion I've had with a particular developer, they want to go full net zero on a particular project, and it's not penciling out for them. And, you know, perhaps the city could provide sort of the final push to get some of these projects over the line. It's just a thought. Just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
You know, nothing at the moment, but I appreciate what you're talking about. And I think, you know, one of the things that this commission always talks about is how do we get the price of carbon right? And I think it's sometimes challenging to just say, let's push someone over the line in a particular area versus can we across the whole system say, this is what these things are valued at, and then more uniformly allow what are the market winners to emerge. But certainly appreciate the need for advancing that. And you know, I think maybe backing up a step from there is let's get the most progressive codes in place that we possibly can.
Yeah, thanks. Those are some great comments. Yeah, Commissioner Islam, comments, thoughts?
Sure. Thanks, Chip. Ben, thanks for the excellent summary and congrats on moving over to Honolulu. I'm sure Kauai is sad to lose you. But I just wanted to actually echo something that Chip said. I was just on a call earlier about benchmarking and building performance standards. And the big conversation of this was actually looking at it with an equity lens. And I fully agree that we need to advance as fast as we can in terms of adopting the most progressive code. I think what we're understanding now in the energy code market is that 2024 is our last touch point of really reaching our sort of our zero energy sort of targets. So we must act now, kind of echoing what Scott Glenn said. I guess going to my question, which is really, have we started to look at perhaps some of the challenges in our market, really kind of focusing on building typology and seeing if there's perhaps different pathways for certain markets, like say the affordable housing or sort of our new construction sort of commercial, in that we have maybe adjusted compliance paths for them to sort of meet the larger sort of energy target. That I think might perhaps provide more of sort of an equitable lens and sort of charge on how we provide and meet sort of our larger efficiency targets and renewable targets.
So I love that you're injecting the conversation of equity in this. And I think, you know, it's very obvious that traditional benchmarking policies around the country have been really just about big commercial buildings and how do we drive efficiency into them. And so some of the conversations we're having are really how to focus, just like you said, on housing with this benchmarking policy in particular, and trying to make sure that there is a clear transparency about how housing facilities are performing around the island, and whether that then opens up policy discussions on how we can enable those facilities to get more up to speed. So I think that's a key part. Another part that we're really thinking about is really looking at these things holistically. And so, I had a great query from Katie from Ulupono the other day, and she said, "Hey, are you guys going to be benchmarking parking spaces as part of this process?" And as soon as she said it, I was like, "Oh, I hope we are," because the beauty of that is all of a sudden we can start to really understand how people are moving around as part of that as well. And I guess that brings to the point that this needs to be about people. And so, again, how do we make these buildings more comfortable? How do we utilize the engagement with these building owners as a way to also connect with the people who occupy the buildings and maybe potentially deliver services there? But there's other actions that also address, I think, the broader portfolio of buildings and equity, and so I think it's not just on benchmarking. One example is our climate action plan obviously talks about trying to help facilitate the development of solarized campaigns around the island, and that's something we've been definitely looking into with a lot of rigor. But I'd love to hear more of what you envision in terms of talking about a pathway and whether you intended that for existing buildings or specifically for new buildings.
Yeah, I think it's both, but I think what we're finding is that the existing building sector is the huge market that we need to focus on, right? Just the cost of development in Hawaii is so great that oftentimes it's lovely to build new, but not everyone has an opportunity. So I think compliance paths that are more situated or more catered to a particular building typology or community would be a good way to sort of fine tune reduction of energy use engine, looking at sort of renewables and tacking out maybe more greater sort of performance.
Would love the opportunity to take the conversation further offline.
Yeah, I think that's probably better. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
Thanks.
Melanie, those are great comments. I'll just toss in that adaptation is a parallel and potentially simultaneous aspect as well. For instance, to sea level rise. Commissioner Allegado has been collecting questions out of the chat. Rosie, I'll toss it over to you. Thanks.
Okay, since Ben is here, I'll just ask Ikaika Hussey's question, or unless Ikaika, you want to ask your own question about the interest in buildings constructed using mass timber or cross-laminated timber.
Thanks for asking, Rosie. I appreciate it.
So I don't have a great deal of knowledge in this area. I have been following the industry and evolution in general, and I'm aware that obviously there's a lot of engineering standards that are evolving to allow larger buildings out of timber, and that's a very exciting thing, both from the standpoint that it's something that we can continue to grow more of, and also for the fact, as Chip I'm sure appreciates, that it actually sequesters carbon in the building for a long amount of time. But I guess the question becomes, what is the role of the city again in choosing a particular category? And maybe this goes back to the conversation at the very beginning of the meeting where we said, hey, we're really focused at this point, at this kind of phase of our greenhouse gas mitigation strategies on direct emissions. And perhaps this is about more life cycle cost analysis. And that's a direction we certainly want to go, but not necessarily one that we have a robust integration through the building code or other strategies in thus far.
Chip, did you want to return to questions around Scott's? I also see that Katie Mokuau has her hand raised.
Yeah, why don't we hop over to Katie? Your hand's been up for a little bit.
Hi, sorry, I did raise my hand earlier, but I did have a question in terms of Honolulu and whether you folks, I'm calling in from Molokai, sorry, I'm working on the climate change and sea level resilience plan here on behalf of Sustainable Molokai, but I have an architecture background and used to work in Santa Monica, and I know they're one of the most progressive cities as far as green codes and municipal buildings, and I wanted to know in terms of that, how much you guys are looking at other cities as far as progressiveness and trying to implement certain things here in Hawaii. I know there's a large shift as technology and readiness in Hawaii, but that's just my question. Thank you.
So the question is perhaps about how to advance the codes at a more rapid pace, and specifically utilization of green codes. Do I have that right?
Yes, and what other, I guess, if you're looking at other city codes and other cities like Santa Monica and other ones in LA that are, you know, more progressive and taking precedence from that.
So I think one thing that fits into this piece of the conversation is certainly, you know, one of the conversations that's happening nationally that maybe hits Honolulu first or Oahu first is this idea of grid integrated efficient buildings. And so, you know, obviously with all the integration of renewable energy that's happening on the grid and the, you know, the expected boom in terms of load from electric vehicles, you know, really what we're talking about is we're trying to get our buildings and our vehicles to really perform in an integrated way on a grid that's got to do a whole lot more for us. And so I think that's an area in particular that we could be way out in front potentially. And certainly we've done some initial outreach to HECO and to the PUC to ask, hey, is this an area of interest? And we do hope to be also connecting with some of the national code institutes on what is the front, you know, what is the leading edge of those kind of things in code? Because we do have plenty of programs right now, but we miss a lot of buildings in that it's not a requirement. It's something that often a building owner will come in and integrate after the fact. Because there's a utility program or some other mechanism to trigger it. But can we prepare our buildings to basically plug into the grid in a much more sophisticated way going forward? So that's one area. I think you know that does the building code do it all is certainly a question that we have to raise. And I think there's, you know, when you look at the Department of Transportation Services and the importance of transportation as it relates to buildings and land use, I think those are some of the other really, really critical aspects of this conversation. And I did hold off on those because Chair Fletcher was very clear about the kind of the scope for today's call, but I can envision, and I think our office and our climate action plan envisions really a lot of that being essential to achieving all these kind of things that you're talking about.
And feel free to expand at any point.
I was also going to ask Ben if you could stop sharing your screen, then we can make sure we see all of the participants to the meeting.
So Rosie, is it your thinking that a lot of the questions you have are for Scott? And
yep, the remaining questions are for Scott.
Okay, why don't we move to McKenna with regard to focusing on Ben for right now, and then we can get back to state level questions. So McKenna?
I don't really have any questions. I just want to thank you for your work, Ben, and congratulate you on the new role and move to Oahu. And yes, I'm sure Kauai County misses you, but good to have you here. So yeah, we can go back to Rosie and the chat, Chip.
Okay, yep, Rosie.
Oh, I know Susan Gorman Chang had a question previously. She asked, how will the energy demand response program for more solar panels and battery backup for residential homes that will share their power with the grid help get more solar online? In other words, what's the projection of how much solar that program will give us? And that's for Scott.
Thanks, Susan. Just quickly before getting into that, to tie back to what Ben was talking about, right now, Hawaiian Electric, for its 100% renewable electricity program, it has what's called integrated grid planning. And they're currently planning for 100% of residential roofs on Oahu to be net zero, and a third of commercial buildings as well. And by net zero, they mean that the individual users zeroing out their energy need, although that doesn't account for adding in the EV piece to that user at this point. So they're working on that, folding that in. But to underscore the conversation at the state level and the grid planning level, we're planning for every building to have a solar panel on it, one way or another. So that's already in the works. And the more the building code and the city can align and help make that happen, the better. And we're also at the state insurance office looking at ways to help strengthen buildings for hurricanes, as well as hosting these solar panels. So a lot of buildings are going to have to be upgraded, and their, you know, just their physical structure, their roofs, their walls, to be able to host these panels. So that's a whole lot of stuff that's going to have to happen as well on that side. For the solar that's coming online and the batteries, yeah, exactly. Sorry, I just saw the comment. So for the solar that's coming online, it will be part of part of the mix right now. That estimate is that rooftop solar and battery will supply about 40% of Oahu's electricity needs, not energy needs, not EV ground transportation, but about 40% of the electricity demand that Oahu is going to need. So, so it's definitely has a critical role, and we want to promote as much of it as we can.
Mahalo. Katie Rooney asked the question of if you can elaborate on what your office is looking at in terms of reducing vehicle demand miles traveled from ground transportation.
Katie, thank you for the plug. We are hiring right now for someone to work on vehicle miles travel reducing, as well as state fleet conversion. So if you're interested, please go to our website, fill out an application. We're in the hiring window right now. For VMT reduction, the way that as the Energy Office we're approaching the question is we see it as a form of energy efficiency, right? And I think Matt Geyer made a comment as well. Energy efficiency is the first strategy we need to pursue for energy and climate change. We have to start there. There's different things that require priorities, like we got to deal with the coal plant being turned off and replacing that energy. That's a near-term sprint, so to speak, that we have to focus on, but we're not losing sight of the building code. And we're starting to focus as well now with like this position on VMT reduction, as well as things like smart growth and building efficiency, good complete streets. All of those things help to reduce the use of automobiles. And frankly, if we replace all 1 million plus cars on Oahu with EVs, then we failed. We missed the opportunity to really meaningfully change the direction of climate action for the island. We can't just bring up 1 million EVs in the next 10 years and say we're solving the climate crisis. We have to figure out how to have more complete streets, walkable communities, reducing the need to drive and reducing the need for that energy, which in turn reduces the need for more ag land having to go to solar panels and to wind. That's the relationship there that we're focused on.
Mahalo. If in the middle of these questions, you also have the ability to drop in the chat the link to that job opportunity, then I think it can be registered into the minutes. But Zena had asked a question about whether or not the electricity is currently going to transportation. Is it negligible, or is there no line in the Sankey diagram from electricity generation to transportation because it's being captured and flows to residential and commercial where vehicles are charged and cannot be distinguished?
Zena, I think you got the gist of it. Most of that is being tracked now through building electricity bills, right? So you charge at a facility, that extra electricity use shows up on the building's use. And we'll see more direct line charging where it'll go from the utility to a car, and that'll show up more. Right now it's negligible in terms of like the Sankey diagram level of view. But also that new line going from electricity to transportation will be capturing the inter-island and shipping aspects of transportation as well as they go electric.
Mahalo. And then Ted Boland's question was, if hydrogen is generated from natural gas, isn't that increasing or at least not reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Tough question, Ted. I would say that hydrogen's a energy carrier. So if it's natural gas that's being used anyway, and it's being converted to hydrogen and then still being used, I don't know if it's increasing it or not, so much as just changing the molecule that's carrying it from methane to H2, and what energy loss there might be in that change. If it's displacing other forms of renewable energy, then definitely increasing fossil emissions. I'm just thinking heuristically, high level, and maybe Chip or McKenna or any of the other scientists who might be able to opine better on that. I just come back to hydrogen being an energy carrier, and where it comes from is what matters, and what it gets used for is what matters, and what it replaces, what's it's a substitute for. So it could be but also not necessarily. If it's displacing solar from hydrogen from solar, then that's one thing. If it's displacing hydrogen from petroleum, that's a different question.
Matt, you entered a question in the chat. Do you want to ask it out loud for the record? That would be Matt Geyer.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just saying, if you can capture the carbon at the point where you're converting to hydrogen, wouldn't that be, that would be a better way, I think, Ton. While I've unmuted, I wanted to ask, where does putting a price on carbon and returning the fee back to residents fit into the state's zero emission clean economy targets, and or even a green fee and returning the proceeds from a green fee back to residents fit in as far as reducing our emissions?
Yeah, both of those questions are in front of the legislature regarding a green fee or a price on carbon. And we'll have to see what the appetite is in this next session for doing something about it. Both, I think all of the bills related to that were deferred last session. And because this is the second year of a 2-year cycle, those bills technically are still viable, or legislators may choose to introduce new bills at the beginning of this session, and we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. If any more come up, just jump in. Scott, what's the status of rental fleet conversion?
I'll have to get back to you on that. My understanding is that there's limited conversion to EVs happening right now. I don't know for a fact, though, what the current status is. The legislature did pass a law last session that directs state employees that whenever they travel inter-island, actually whenever they travel, I think, they are expected to rent an EV if one is available. And if one is not available, then go through the kind of fuel efficiency hierarchy of fossil fuel cars. The purpose of that is because outside of COVID, the state travels a lot. We take thousands of trips a month, hundreds a day as state employees across the islands, renting cars. So we're a constant, steady source of demand to rental car companies and rental fleets. And so as state employees travel to Hilo, for example, from Honolulu, often all they're doing is going from the airport to a state facility, to lunch, back to the state facility, back to the airport. And so ideally they're carpooling, first of all. They're getting picked up or something like that. But secondly, if they have to rent a car, why not rent an EV? And so what this law does is it sends a steady demand signal to the EV rental car, or to the rental car companies, that if they have an EV on the lot, then most likely a state employee is going to show up that day. And if a tourist hasn't taken it, the state employee will take it, unless there's some unique purpose that they don't.
I think converting their fleet represents a significant cost to the rental companies. So maybe the legislature could consider some additional motivation for them besides just that demand. And then,
but Chip, can I just follow up on that? Because on Maui and Oahu, we have built these CONRACs, consolidated rental car facilities, and we did not build EV charging into those buildings. So we've moved the rental car companies into these giant parking lots that we've built at the airports. And so they have a challenge as well. They might say, I want to convert, but where you're telling me my fleet has to actually be, you don't have the infrastructure there for me to use it.
Yeah.
So we got to work through that.
Well, typically it's up to government to solve the chicken and egg problem like that. And what about offshore wind? What are your thoughts there?
Offshore wind right now is something that we are basically watching the federal government there have been several proposals for offshore wind around Oahu, and they have not moved forward because of national security concerns by the federal government in terms of their operational needs and training needs. And so without saying too much more, we're basically kind of in a holding pattern as the state until we get direction from the federal government on resolving some of those concerns.
Is there any timing on that?
Not that I can really say, we hope to get some direction in the next few months, this year sometime. The president has made it quite clear that he thinks offshore wind is an important part of the national strategy for climate action. So we'll see how that relates to the federal local relationship.
Okay, thanks. Other thoughts, commissioners, questions?
I see a question from Matt Geyer here about inter-island. And I think right now this is we're figuring it out as we go. We're trying to look at it. Some of the important considerations, I think where we are right now is that the grids on each island are different sizes. So Oahu is by far the largest grid. But Lanai, for example, it's 4 megawatts. That's like a neighborhood's rooftop power capacity on Oahu, right? So Molokai is about 6, I think, to 7 megawatts. There's solar farms. Most of the solar farms on Oahu are larger than that. And so if we're thinking about inter-island flights to especially the islands with smaller grids, we have to think about the charging capacity of those airports and what it means for grid growth. Most likely what that means is some level of battery at the airport. Maybe the flights charge only on the larger islands, Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii, maybe Kauai, but not on Molokai and Lanai. They fly round trip, charge back on the other island. And I think one of the larger constraints we're learning about for inter-island flight is they still want to keep their turnaround schedules. So planes on the ground for 20 minutes. And so they need to be able to charge the plane back up, replace the battery on the plane to be able to get it to still take off within the window that they have of being on the ground. So these are some of the different factors that we're looking into and learning about.
Scott, you mentioned the plans to put solar on every roof. There have been government programs to relieve some of the financial aspects of that for the homeowner, but I think we're a long ways away from many, many homeowners who are still struggling just to put food on the table every day. What are we going to do about those many thousands of roofs from an equity point of view, where there simply is not the cash available to take a big step like that?
Ben, I saw you in mute. Would you like to? I'd be happy to jump in on this one as well, if that's okay, Chip. The action about solarizing really points to the idea that this is very many cases is a cash positive thing, and so it's really just the upfront capital that is required. And so the idea behind a Solarize campaign is to really plug in people who have very busy lives and who maybe don't think that they qualify with folks that they know in their community who can say, hey, here's the resources, here's how this works. And so we're working hard on kind of the technical side, trying to figure out what does that toolkit look like? And then we hope to be getting out to and making partnerships with community-based organizations who want to be out in front and actually sell that and pitch that to their own community members in language that makes sense to them. And we agree 100%. We need all the rooftop solar we can get. It is very cost effective, so we think it's an opportunity. The last thing I'll say is it's, as you know, a great opportunity when you're touching the roof to do some other things. We want to make the house cooler and more resistant to heat, so let's make sure we get the best roof covering possible. We also want to make sure that we are storm resistant, so maybe let's go in there and retrofit for hurricane ties and things like that. So huge opportunity, something that the office is definitely paying attention to, and I think others as well.
Thanks, Ben. And if I could just riff off that as well, we're talking about rooftops, but we're hearing more and more requests from especially the rural communities about town and some of the more urbanized areas having parking lot solar as well to cover hardscapes, cool it off, and again, reduce the pressure on some of our agricultural land and open lands from having to host solar or other renewable energy technologies.
Can I just jump in on that with a comment? I just wanted to add that it's, liquidity is an issue, but it's not the only issue, right? Like a huge barrier to entry into the market is autonomy over your rooftop, which basically is the owner-renter gap. So, this isn't a Hawaii specific problem, and I don't think there have been a lot of other places that have cracked that nut, but it is the big barrier. Even though there was research done by Sherilyn Hayashida a few years ago showing that the value of the solar capitalized into the house, it doesn't necessarily translate into kind of meeting that owner-renter gap.
All right. More thoughts or questions? Henry, you've been especially silent. Nothing from you?
Only that the state a number of years ago moved towards hydrogen. And while we testified that the drive should be for green hydrogen only, the state actually promoted all types of hydrogen to advance green hydrogen. So 90% of all the hydrogen made for Hawaii comes from fossil fuels, which kind of defeats the purpose. I know a number of years ago, Hawaiian Electric was trying to figure out how to remove sulfur from hydrogen because it came from fossil fuels. Whereas if you just bypass the fossil fuel process and went directly to renewable hydrogen, you wouldn't need to waste your time looking at how to purify hydrogen.
Scott, do you have a comment?
Well, I wasn't at the state at the time, so I can't speak to the state of mind when that was going on. But Riley on Big Island is pursuing exactly that, trying to find the renewable to hydrogen pathway. I think there's value to the fossil fuel to hydrogen pipeline right now, that we need to figure out, how we can get some of this stuff going. And we're going to keep using methane for home heating and things like that to some degree. There's a lot of resistance to the electrification of that. And it creates a lot of conflict around buildings as well. And so the more we can switch things over to hydrogen, and then on the back end, switch it over to renewable, then we've got a two-step process going that can help us keep moving forward on things. That's kind of just high level thinking right now, but I know it's not satisfactory. And at the end of the day, we ultimately do want to be at a full decarbonized economy and energy system.
It would be a bridge fuel to green hydrogen.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking about, is it black hydrogen or gray hydrogen? I know what blue hydrogen is, but I'm thinking of all those in the context of it's a bridge fuel. And most of the time we try and avoid that because you get embedded in it. But yeah, just a thought.
And there was a comment in the chat from Paul Bernstein talking about how blue hydrogen may be worse than coal.
Thanks, Paul. All right, this has been a great discussion. I just want to thank and acknowledge Scott and Ben, especially for putting themselves out there. They've stepped into vulnerable positions, making themselves public, allowing and in fact encouraging the discussion portion of this and reducing the sort of PowerPoint lecture portion. We really do appreciate the work both of you are doing, and the city and county and the state are incredibly blessed to have both of you working as public servants. So I know I'm speaking on behalf of the whole commission in thanking you for your continued public work. Thank you so much. And we're going to move forward on the agenda. The next item, item 9, is public input for matters not on the agenda. Do we have anything there? All right. And there's really only 1 or 2 more formal steps that are relatively quick on the agenda. So we are very close to winding this up for the day. I just want to open it one last time. If anybody has any comments or questions, we have a minute or 2 available for that.
Just wanted to reiterate, thank you to Matt and Ben and to the commission. You guys are doing a great job, and hopefully we can get a copy of those presentations.
Yes, I've already been talking with Haley about getting a copy of both presentations and posting them publicly on the commission site or the resiliency office site. So the next item is tentative next meeting date. We currently are not scheduled, but we're going to work with commissioners offline to get that scheduled, as well as post that as soon as possible up on the resiliency office website. And are there any announcements, commissioners or the public, any announcements at this point? I can't help but note that moving into the Zoom world has, at least in my case, made me much more comfortable with pregnant silences. I just allow them to go on. It's just part of, if you're a teacher, it's just part of running a classroom these days. I'm up to adjournment. I want to thank everybody. This has been a special morning for me, at least. And it's great to have Melanie on board. It's clear your expertise is going to play a big role with commission as we move forward. So thanks for your service. And I want to thank all the commissioners for their service and the public for joining us. So thank you very much. At this point, what do we do? Do I take a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
If you're at the end of the agenda, you can just adjourn.
Okay, we are adjourned, everybody. Thanks very much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.